The moment Clara saw those two pink lines, she knew her world was about to explode. Mason Reed had one unbreakable rule: no more children. Ever. He'd raised his daughter alone after being abandoned, and he'd sworn never to risk that pain again. Clara Bennett knew this when they fell in love. She'd agreed to it. But now, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, she faced an impossible choice: keep the secret and lose herself, or tell the truth and lose him. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The alarm clock's sharp beep cut through the pre-dawn silence at exactly 5:47 a.m. Mason Reed's hand shot out from under the covers with practiced precision, silencing it before the second beep could sound. He lay still for 3 seconds, a habit formed over years of single fatherhood, listening for any sign that the noise had woken his daughter in the room down the hall. Silence. Good. Mason swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet finding the cool hardwood floor. At 34, his body still moved with the efficiency of a man who'd learned early that wasted motion meant wasted time, and time was the one thing he never had enough of. He pulled on sweatpants and a faded Georgetown University t-shirt, remnants of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. The house was a modest 2-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs, his and Lily's. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every carefully chosen piece of furniture represented a choice Mason had made alone. He'd bought it 3 years ago, shortly after Lily's mother had vanished from their lives without so much warning as a forwarding address. Mason moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision. Coffee first. Dark roast. No sugar. Cream measured to exactly 2 tablespoons. While it brewed, he laid out Lily's clothes for school: jeans, her favorite purple sweater with the tiny embroidered stars, matching socks rolled together so she wouldn't waste time searching for pairs. He prepared her lunch: turkey sandwich on whole wheat, apple slices with a small container of peanut butter, carrot sticks, and exactly 4 Oreos because 5 felt excessive and 3 felt cruel. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. By 6:15, he was at his laptop in the kitchen, responding to work emails before the day officially began. Mason worked as a project manager for a mid-sized tech firm, a job that paid well enough and offered the flexibility he needed to be present for Lily. He'd turned down 2 promotions in the past year. Both would have required travel, longer hours, less predictability. Not worth it. Nothing was worth risking what he'd built. At 6:45, he climbed the stairs and gently pushed open Lily's door. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with a wild tangle of dark curls that she'd inherited from her mother and Mason's gray-green eyes. She slept curled on her side, one arm wrapped around a stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunks. "Lily Bean," Mason said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Time to wake up, sweetheart." She stirred, mumbling something incomprehensible. "Come on, baby girl, school day." Her eyes cracked open, and she looked at him with that sleepy, vulnerable expression that never failed to crack something open in his chest. "5 more minutes? You said that yesterday and we were almost late, remember?" Lily sighed dramatically and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Is it pancake day?" "Wednesday is pancake day. Today is Tuesday. We have oatmeal with bananas and honey." "Oatmeal is boring. Oatmeal is nutritious. Come on, teeth and clothes first, then breakfast." This was their dance, the same steps every morning. Mason had built their life on routines because routines were safe. Routines meant no surprises, no chaos, no moment where he might look around and realize he was failing her. 20 minutes later, Lily sat at the kitchen table in her purple sweater, swinging her legs as she ate oatmeal without much enthusiasm. Mason stood at the counter, scrolling through his phone while he finished his second cup of coffee. A text message appeared on his screen. His heart did that stupid flutter it always did when he saw her name, Clara. "Morning sleep okay?" Mason felt his mouth curve into a smile before he could stop it. Clara Bennett had entered his life 6 months ago like a warm breeze through a window he hadn't realized he'd left open. They'd met at a coffee shop, cliché he knew, when she'd accidentally grabbed his drink order and taken a sip before realizing her mistake. She'd been mortified. He'd been charmed. "Mason. Slept fine. You?" "Clara. Not great. Can we talk later? Mason's smile faded slightly. Something in those words felt off, weighted with meaning he couldn't quite grasp. Mason, everything okay? Clara, yeah, just call me when you get a chance? He typed out a response, deleted it, typed again. Mason, will do. Busy morning with Lily, but I'll call this afternoon. Daddy, you're smiling at your phone again. Mason looked up to find Lily watching him with an expression far too knowing for a 7-year-old. I'm reading work emails, he lied badly. You don't smile at work emails. You do that scrunchy face. She demonstrated, wrinkling her nose and furrowing her brow in a way that was both adorable and uncomfortably accurate. Eat your oatmeal, smarty pants. Is it Clara? Mason set his phone down, giving his daughter his full attention. They'd had the conversation about Clara early on. Mason believed in honesty, age-appropriate honesty, and Lily had seemed to accept that Daddy had a friend who was a girl, a special friend. Yes, it's Clara. Are you going to marry her? Lily. Emma's mom got married last year, and now Emma has a stepdad who takes them to Disneyland. That's nice for Emma. So are you going to marry Clara? Mason came around the counter and sat down across from his daughter, looking her square in the eye. Lily, you know how I've explained that Clara and I we're seeing each other, we're dating, but that doesn't automatically mean marriage. But you like her. I do like her. And she likes you. I believe so, yes. Then why wouldn't you marry her? Because marriage means promises I'm not sure I can keep. Because marriage means risking everything I've built. Because the last woman I trusted to stay walked away without a backward glance, and I won't survive that again. And I definitely won't let you survive that again. But he couldn't say any of that to a 7-year-old. Relationships are complicated, sweetheart. Even when people really like each other, it doesn't mean they're ready for marriage, and that's okay. Not every story has to end with a wedding. Lily considered this, tilting her head in that thoughtful way she had. But some stories do. Some stories do, Mason conceded. I hope yours does. I like Clara. She's nice, and she doesn't try too hard to make me like her, which is cool. Mason felt his throat tighten. Yeah, she is pretty cool, isn't she? The coolest. Lily shoved another spoonful of oatmeal into her mouth. After you, obviously. Obviously. 1. Across town, in a converted loft apartment in Portland's Pearl District, Clara Bennett sat on her bathroom floor, her back against the cool tile wall, staring at the pregnancy test she'd taken 20 minutes earlier. 2 pink lines. She'd taken 3 more tests just to be sure. All positive. Her phone sat on the sink counter, Mason's brief text message still glowing on the screen. She'd read it 4 times, trying to decode meaning from pixels and punctuation marks. He'd call this afternoon. That was good. Normal. Except nothing about this was normal. Clara was 29 years old, an elementary school art teacher with a studio apartment full of half-finished paintings and plants she somehow managed not to kill. She'd moved to Portland 2 years ago from Chicago, trying to outrun a relationship that had left her feeling small and invisible. She'd promised herself she'd stay single for at least a year, focus on her art, learn to be happy alone. Then she'd met Mason Reed and accidentally stolen his vanilla latte. She remembered that day with painful clarity. She'd been running late for a gallery showing, distracted, stressed. She'd grabbed the cup with Mason scrawled on it in Sharpie, taken a sip, and immediately realized her mistake when she tasted vanilla instead of her usual oat milk cappuccino. She'd turned to apologize and found herself looking into the most exhausted, kind, gray-green eyes she'd ever seen. "I'm so sorry," she'd blurted. I grabbed the wrong, do you want me to buy you another? He'd smiled, and that smile had done something dangerous to her heart. It's fine. Really. I watched you take it. You looked like you needed it more than me. That's very generous, considering I just drank your coffee. Well, you only had 1 sip. We could share? And somehow, she'd ended up sharing a vanilla latte with a handsome stranger in a coffee shop, which had turned into sharing phone numbers, which had turned into a dinner date, which had turned into 6 months of the most careful, thoughtful, complicated relationship of her life. Mason had been upfront from the beginning about his situation. Single father. Sole custody. His daughter came first, always, no exceptions. and absolutely, positively no interest in having more children. Clara had understood. She'd respected it. She'd even admired it. His devotion to Lily, his fierce protectiveness, the way he'd built a whole life around making sure his daughter felt safe and loved. But she'd also heard the fear underneath his words, the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned Lily's mother, the careful control he maintained over every aspect of his life, as if one wrong move might cause everything to collapse. Clara had fallen in love with him anyway, maybe because of it, maybe despite it. And now she was pregnant. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting on the cold floor. She caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, pale skin, dark circles under her blue eyes, auburn hair pulled into a messy bun. She didn't look pregnant. She didn't feel pregnant, except for a persistent nausea that she'd been attributing to stress for the past 2 weeks. She'd missed her period. Then she'd missed it again. She'd made excuses, stress, irregular cycles, her body adjusting to new birth control. But this morning, she'd woken up with a certainty that had sent her to the drugstore before sunrise. Now she knew. Clara picked up her phone and scrolled through her recent messages with Mason. They texted throughout the day, little check-ins, shared jokes, pictures of things that made them think of each other. It was easy and comfortable and exactly the kind of relationship she'd never thought she'd have, except for the one giant non-negotiable boundary: no more children. Mason had said it explicitly on their third date. They'd been walking through a park, watching families spread out on blankets for a summer concert, and he'd stopped, turned to face her with absolute seriousness. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. I don't want more kids. Not now, not ever. Lily is my world, and I don't have room for more. If that's something you want someday, I understand, but I can't be that person for you." She'd assured him it was fine. She'd been honest. She hadn't given much thought to children. Her life was her art, her teaching, her freedom. A baby had never been part of her plan. But plans change. Standing in her bathroom, staring at 4 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the counter, Clara made a decision. She wanted this baby. The realization didn't come with fireworks or dramatic music. It was quiet and certain, settling into her bones like truth. She wanted this baby. Not because of Mason, not to trap him or change his mind, but because when she imagined her future, she suddenly saw a child in it. Her child. But that meant telling Mason. And telling Mason meant losing him. She understood with perfect clarity that those were her only 2 options: keep the baby and lose Mason, or lose the baby and keep Mason. There was no third path where he magically changed his mind, and they all lived happily ever after. Mason Reed didn't change his mind. He didn't take risks. He didn't open himself up to variables he couldn't control. Clara sat down on her bed, pulled her knees to her chest, and let herself cry. She cried for the relationship that was about to end. She cried for Mason, who was about to have his worst fear realized. She cried for Lily, who'd said she liked Clara and hoped her dad would marry her. Most of all, she cried for the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all, because her decision was already made. She would tell him. She would keep the baby. And she would lose the man she loved. Mason got through his workday on autopilot, his mind only half present in meetings and email chains. Clara's text message nagged at him like a splinter he couldn't quite reach. "Can we talk later?" 3 simple words that somehow carried the weight of impending disaster. He tried to call her during his lunch break, but it went straight to voicemail. He sent a text asking if she was free. No response for 2 hours. Then finally, "Clara, sorry, busy day. Still want to talk though. Can I come over tonight after Lily's asleep?" That was unusual. Clara had been to his house plenty of times, but always during the day when Lily was home. She'd been careful about boundaries, about not confusing his daughter, about respecting the compartmentalization Mason had built his life around. Mason, "Sure, 9 p.m.? Clara, "Perfect. See you then." No emoji, no "can't wait" or "miss you." Just "see you then," which somehow felt worse than silence. Mason picked Lily up from after-school care at 5:30, listening to her chatter about her day with half his attention. They stopped at the grocery store. Lily's choice. She wanted to help cook dinner, and she lobbied hard for spaghetti and meatballs, which Mason agreed to despite it being a deviation from the meal plan. Small rebellions. He could handle small rebellions. They cooked together, Lily standing on a step stool at the counter, rolling ground beef into uneven spheres while Mason chopped onions and garlic. The kitchen filled with the smell of tomato sauce and oregano, and for a moment Mason let himself relax into the normalcy of it all. This was enough. This was everything. Why would he ever need more than this? "Daddy, is Clara coming over?" Mason looked at his daughter, surprised. "Why do you ask?" "You keep checking your phone. You only do that when you're waiting to hear from her." Mason set down his knife, genuinely impressed by his 7-year-old's observational skills and mildly concerned about what that might mean for her teenage years. "Clara might stop by later after your bedtime." "Oh." Lily's face fell slightly. "I won't get to see her?" "Not tonight, sweetheart, but maybe this weekend we can all do something together." "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe the Saturday market?" Clara mentioned wanting to check out some of the art vendors. Lily brightened. "Can we get those mini donuts?" "We can get mini donuts." "Then, yes, that sounds awesome." Mason smiled, but something twisted in his gut. He was making plans for the weekend when he didn't even know what Clara wanted to talk about tonight. For all he knew, she was coming over to break up with him. The thought sent a jolt of panic through his chest that he immediately tried to suppress. He didn't do panic. He did control, planning, careful risk management. Panic was for people who hadn't prepared for every possible outcome. Except he hadn't prepared for Clara. She'd slipped past every defense he'd constructed, and now the thought of losing her made his hands shake as he stirred the pasta sauce. "Get it together," he told himself. "You've survived worse. You've survived being left alone with a baby who couldn't even hold her head up. You've survived sleepless nights and financial stress and the crushing responsibility of being someone's entire world. You can survive a breakup." But the logic didn't help. Because Clara wasn't just a breakup. Clara was the first person in years who'd made him think maybe, just maybe, his life could be more than just survival. By 8:45 p.m., Lily was in bed, freshly bathed and tucked in with Mr. Trunks. Mason had read her 2 chapters of their current book, a fantasy story about a girl who could talk to animals, and kissed her forehead goodnight. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Lily Bean. Sweet dreams." "Will you tell Clara I said hi, if she comes over?" "I'll tell her." Mason closed her door and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the house settle into evening quiet. He'd cleaned the kitchen, started a load of laundry, organized tomorrow's breakfast supplies, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. At 8:58, headlights swept across the living room windows. Mason's heart rate kicked up as he heard a car door close, footsteps on the front path, a soft knock on the door. He opened it to find Clara standing on his porch, wearing jeans and an oversized cardigan, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and terrified, and Mason felt his stomach drop. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, come in." She stepped inside and he caught the familiar scent of her perfume, something vanilla and warm that always made him want to pull her close. But something in her body language stopped him. She was holding herself carefully, like she might shatter. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" "No, I'm okay." She moved into the living room but didn't sit down, instead standing near the window with her arms wrapped around herself. Mason closed the door and followed her, every instinct screaming that whatever was about to happen, he wasn't ready for it. "Clara, you're scaring me. What's going on?" She turned to face him, and he saw her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. Clara never cried. In 6 months, he'd never seen her cry. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through it before you say anything. Can you do that?" Mason's throat went dry. "Okay. I'm pregnant." 2 words. Just 2 words, and Mason's entire carefully constructed world tilted sideways. He stared at her, his brain struggling to process what she'd just said. Pregnant. Clara was pregnant. Which meant, "It's yours," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears starting to stream down her cheeks. "I know we were careful. I know I was on birth control. But I'm pregnant, and it's yours. And before you say anything, I need you to know that I've already made my decision." Mason couldn't speak. His lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to function. All he could do was stand there, watching her cry, watching his entire life crack apart. "I'm keeping the baby," Clara said. "I know that's not what you want. I know you told me from the beginning that you didn't want more children, and I respect that, I do. But I can't—" Her voice broke. "I can't not have this baby, Mason. I've thought about it from every angle, and I want this child." The room was spinning. Mason gripped the back of the couch to steady himself. "You don't have to be involved," Clara continued. "I mean, obviously, there are legal things we'll need to figure out, but I'm not asking you to be a father to this baby if you don't want to be. I'm not trying to trap you or change your mind or ruin your life. I just needed you to know. You deserve to know." Mason finally found his voice, and it came out rough, barely recognizable. "How long have you known?" "I took the test this morning. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you all day." "The birth control. I don't know what happened. I took it every day. I was careful. But nothing is 100%, and I guess we're in the unlucky percentage." Unlucky. She'd called it unlucky, and she wasn't wrong. This was Mason's worst nightmare, the scenario he'd spent 7 years trying to prevent. Another child. Another risk. Another chance for everything to fall apart. "Say something," Clara whispered. "Please." Mason looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear in her eyes. She was terrified. She was standing in his living room, pregnant with his child, telling him she was going to do this alone if she had to, and she was absolutely terrified. And all he could think about was Lily, 3 days old, screaming in his arms at 2 in the morning while he Googled, "Why won't baby stop crying?" because her mother had left and he had no idea what he was doing. He thought about the crushing weight of sole responsibility, the constant fear that he was failing, the way he'd had to give up every dream and plan and piece of himself to become the father Lily needed. He couldn't do that again. He couldn't survive that again. "I need you to leave," he said quietly. Clara flinched like he'd slapped her. "Mason, I can't talk about this right now. I need time. I need to think." "Okay." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "Okay. I understand." She moved toward the door, and Mason followed, his body moving on autopilot while his mind screamed in chaos. At the threshold, Clara turned back. "I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "I need you to know that. I love you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like an ending. Mason stood in his empty living room, the silence pressing in from all sides, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Clara was pregnant. He was going to be a father again, and he had absolutely no idea how to survive it. Mason didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as car headlights swept past his window, his mind racing through every possible scenario and finding no good outcomes in any of them. Clara was pregnant, with his child, the child he'd explicitly said he never wanted. He rolled onto his side, punching his pillow into a different shape as if that might somehow make sleep possible. It didn't. Nothing could quiet the storm in his head, memories mixing with fears, past trauma bleeding into present panic. His phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. Part of him wanted to call Clara, to say something, anything other than, "I need you to leave." But what could he possibly say? That he was sorry? That would be a lie. He wasn't sorry for his boundaries, for knowing his limits. He was sorry she was hurting, sorry they were in this impossible situation, but not sorry for protecting himself and Lily from exactly this kind of chaos. Except it had happened anyway. All his careful planning, all his control, and life had still found a way to detonate a bomb in the middle of everything he'd built. At 3:47 a.m., Mason gave up on sleep entirely. He went downstairs, made coffee, and sat at his laptop trying to work. But the spreadsheets and project timelines might as well have been written in a foreign language. All he could see was Clara's face, the way she'd look standing in his living room with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm keeping the baby. I know that's not what you want." She was right. It wasn't what he wanted. It was never what he wanted. Mason pushed away from the laptop and walked to the window, looking out at his quiet street still dark with pre-dawn shadows. Somewhere across town, Clara was probably awake too, maybe crying, maybe planning her future as a single mother. The thought made his chest ache in ways he didn't want to examine. He heard a sound behind him and turned to find Lily standing at the bottom of the stairs in her pajamas, clutching Mr. Trunks, her hair a wild tangle around her sleepy face. "Daddy, why are you awake?" Mason's heart sank. "Just couldn't sleep, sweetheart. Why are you up?" "I had a bad dream." She padded across the living room and climbed onto the couch, curling into a small ball. "Can I stay down here with you?" "Of course." Mason sat beside her, and she immediately snuggled against his side, warm and small and trusting. He wrapped his arm around her, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "What was your dream about?" "I don't remember exactly. Something scary was chasing me, and I couldn't run fast enough." She yawned, already half asleep again against his shoulder. "But it's okay now. You're here." Mason felt something crack open in his chest. "You're here." 2 words that carried the weight of 7 years, every sacrifice he'd made, every piece of himself he'd given up to make sure those words stayed true. What would happen if there was another child? Would he still be here for Lily? Would his attention get divided? His resources stretched too thin? Would she stop feeling safe because he'd failed to protect their carefully balanced world? "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Is Clara okay? You seem sad." Mason looked down at his daughter, surprised by her perceptiveness even after 7 years of constantly being surprised by it. "Why do you think I'm sad?" "You have your sad face, the one you get when you're worried about money or when I'm sick." "I'm fine, Lily Bean, just tired." "Is Clara sick?" "No, she's not sick." "Did you have a fight?" Mason hesitated, unsure how to answer. He'd always tried to be honest with Lily, but there were limits to what a 7-year-old needed to know about adult relationships. "Clara and we're figuring some of things out, that's all." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then, "Emma's mom and dad figured things out, and then they got divorced. Is that what's happening?" "Clara and I aren't married, so no, that's not what's happening." "But you might not be together anymore." The question hung in the air between them, and Mason realized he didn't know how to answer it. 24 hours ago, he would have said his relationship with Clara was solid, maybe even permanent. Now everything felt uncertain, like standing on ice that was starting to crack beneath his feet. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Relationships are complicated." "I like Clara," Lily said quietly. "I hope you don't stop being together." "I know you do. I like her too." "Then why would you stop?" "Because she's pregnant. Because she wants to keep a baby I'm not ready to have. Because I'm terrified of failing another child the way I'm probably already failing you without even knowing it. Sometimes people like each other a lot but still can't be together. It's hard to explain." Lily sighed, a sound far too world-weary for someone who still believed in the tooth fairy. "Adults are weird." "Yeah, we really are." They sat together in the quiet darkness, and Mason felt the weight of everything crushing down on him. He'd built a good life for Lily, a safe life. And now that safety was threatened by something he couldn't control, couldn't plan around, couldn't protect her from. Eventually, Lily fell back asleep against his shoulder. Mason carried her upstairs and tucked her back into bed, watching her settle into sleep with the resilience only children possessed. She'd wake up in a few hours with no memory of this conversation, ready to face a new day with enthusiasm. Mason envied her that ability to reset, to shake off worry like water off a duck's back. He went through the motions of the morning routine on autopilot, coffee, emails, laying out Lily's clothes. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying last night's conversation with Clara over and over, searching for something he could have said differently, some way this could have ended better. There wasn't one. He knew that. The moment Clara decided to keep the baby, their paths had diverged into 2 different futures that couldn't coexist. His phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, his heart leaped, thinking it might be Clara. But it was just his boss asking about a project deadline. Mason stared at the phone, his thumb hovering over Clara's name in his contacts. He should call her. He should say something more than, "I need you to leave." But every time he tried to form words, his throat closed up with a fear so primal it made him nauseous. The day crawled by. Mason went through the motions at work, sitting in meetings without hearing a word anyone said, responding to emails without reading them properly, existing in a fog of anxiety and exhaustion. His coworker Sarah asked if he was feeling okay at lunch, and he'd mumbled something about not sleeping well, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. He picked up Lily from school, took her to her piano lesson, helped her with homework, made dinner. Every action felt mechanical, like he was watching himself from outside his body, going through the motions of a life that didn't quite feel real anymore. That night, after Lily was asleep, Mason finally allowed himself to really think about what Clara had said. She was keeping the baby. She'd made her choice, and she'd made it without him, which he supposed was fair since he'd made his choice years ago without her. But that didn't make it easier. Mason pulled out his laptop and did something he immediately knew was a mistake. He Googled unplanned pregnancy. The results were overwhelming. Articles about options, support groups, legal advice, financial planning. He clicked on a forum for single fathers and immediately regretted it. Story after story of men struggling with custody battles, child support, co-parenting with exes they couldn't stand. This would be his life. Even if he walked away, which he legally couldn't, not entirely, Clara could still come after him for child support. And should she? Probably. It was his child, even if he didn't want it. His child. The words felt foreign in his mind. He had a child. Lily. She was his child. The idea of another one, another person depending on him, another life he could irreparably damage with one wrong decision, it was too much. Mason closed the laptop and dropped his head into his hands. He was being selfish. He knew that. Clara was the one who was actually pregnant, who would have to carry this baby, give birth, raise a child potentially alone. And here he was, drowning in his own fear and resentment. But knowing he was selfish didn't make the feelings go away. His phone rang, shattering the silence. Mason grabbed it, saw Clara's name, and felt his heart stop. He answered before he could overthink it. Hello? Hi. Her voice was small, tentative. Is this a bad time? No, Lily's asleep. I'm just sitting here. I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about last night, about the way I told you. I'm sorry. I should have, I don't know, found a better way. There's no good way to deliver that kind of news, Clara. No, I guess not. She was quiet for a moment. Have you eaten today? I realized I haven't seen you eat in the last 24 hours, and I'm worried. Sorry, that's stupid. You're a grown man. You can feed yourself. Despite everything, Mason felt the corner of his mouth twitch. I had a sandwich at lunch. Liar, you always skip lunch when you're stressed. She was right. He had skipped lunch. The fact that she knew that she'd paid attention to his habits and patterns, made something ache in his chest. How are you feeling? He asked. Physically, I mean. The pregnancy. Nauseous, tired, scared out of my mind. A shaky laugh. But physically, I'm okay. I have an appointment with my doctor next week to confirm everything and figure out next steps. Next steps. Like this was a project to be managed, a problem to be solved. Mason, I meant what I said. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to be. I know this isn't what you signed up for. None of this is what either of us signed up for. No. Her voice cracked slightly. It's really not. Mason stood up and started pacing, needing movement to channel the energy coursing through him. I don't know what to do, Clara. I don't know how to... He stopped, struggling to find words. When Lily's mom left, I was 27 years old with a 3-day-old baby and no idea how to keep her alive. I figured it out because I had to, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I swore I would never put myself in that position again. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you're asking of me? I'm not asking anything of you. Clara's voice rose, frustration bleeding through. I told you, you can walk away. I'm giving you permission to walk away. That's more than most women in my position would offer. That's not... Mason dragged his hand through his hair. You think I can just walk away, pretend this child doesn't exist? Clara, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not that guy. Then what do you want from me? You don't want to be involved, but you can't walk away. What am I supposed to do with that? I don't know. The words came out louder than he intended. He took a breath, lowering his voice. I'm sorry. I don't know what I want. I don't know what the right answer is here. The line went quiet except for the sound of Clara's breathing. I can't keep calling you, she finally said. Every time I hear your voice, it hurts a little more. So I think we need some space. I need to figure out how to do this on my own, and you need to figure out what you can live with. Clara, I love you, Mason. That hasn't changed. But I also love this baby, and I'm going to do what's best for them, even if that means letting you go. The call ended, and Mason stood in his living room holding a silent phone, feeling like he'd just lost something irreplaceable. The next few days blurred together in a haze of routine and numbness. Mason went to work, took care of Lily, answered emails, attended meetings. On the surface, everything looked normal. Inside, he was falling apart in slow motion. Lily noticed, of course. She always noticed. You're sad again, she announced over breakfast on Saturday morning. I'm fine, sweetheart. You keep saying that, but your face says you're lying. Mason set down his coffee cup and looked at his daughter. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she learned to read him so easily? Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, and we have to be sad for a little while. But I promise I'm okay. Is it about Clara? Mason hesitated. He'd been avoiding talking about Clara, changing the subject whenever Lily brought her up. But that wasn't fair to his daughter, who clearly cared about Clara and deserved some kind of explanation. Yes, it's about Clara. Did she break up with you? It's complicated. That's what you always say when you don't want to explain things. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Clara and I are taking some time apart to think about things. Why? Because sometimes people need space to figure out what they want. Do you want to be with Clara? The question hit Mason like a punch to the gut. Did he want to be with Clara? A week ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. Now, with a pregnancy standing between them like an insurmountable wall, he didn't know what he wanted. I care about Clara very much, he said carefully. But caring about someone isn't always enough. Lily absorbed this, her small face serious. Emma's mom says love is a choice. You have to choose it every day. Emma's mom sounds very wise. So are you choosing Clara, or are you choosing to be apart? Mason felt like he was being cross-examined by a tiny lawyer. I'm choosing to take time to think about what's best for everyone involved. That sounds like a grown-up way of saying you don't know. Yeah, Lily Bean, that's exactly what it is. That afternoon, while Lily was at a birthday party, Mason did something he'd been avoiding. He drove to Clara's apartment. He sat in his car outside her building for 10 minutes, trying to gather the courage to go inside. What would he even say? He still didn't have answers. He still didn't know if he could be what she needed. But he couldn't keep avoiding her. They had to talk, really talk about what came next. Mason finally got out of the car and made his way to Clara's apartment on the 3rd floor. He knocked, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. No answer. He knocked again, waited. Still nothing. Maybe she wasn't home, or maybe she was home and didn't want to see him. He couldn't blame her if that was the case. Mason was about to leave when the door to the neighboring apartment opened and an older woman peered out. She's not home, the woman said. Left about an hour ago with a suitcase. Mason's stomach dropped. A suitcase? Said she was visiting family for the week. Are you Mason? Yes. How did you... She talks about you sometimes. Seems like a nice girl. Hope you two work things out. The woman disappeared back into her apartment, leaving Mason standing in the hallway feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Clara had left town. She was gone, and she hadn't told him. Mason drove home in a daze, his mind reeling. He'd been avoiding her, pushing her away, telling himself he needed time, and now she'd given him exactly what he'd asked for, space. So why did it feel so much like abandonment? That evening, after picking up Lily from the birthday party and listening to her excited recap of all the games and cake, Mason sat on the couch and finally let himself feel the full weight of everything. Clara was pregnant. She was keeping the baby. She'd left town to give him space, or maybe to protect herself from his indecision. And he was alone with his fear and his stubborn refusal to let anyone close enough to hurt him. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. The first communication in 4 days. The message was simple, just a photo. Clara sitting on what looked like her parents' porch somewhere, a mug of tea in her hands, looking tired but peaceful. The caption read, "Taking some time with family. Thought you should know I'm okay." Mason stared at the photo for a long time. She looked beautiful, even exhausted. There was a softness to her expression he'd seen before, usually when she was painting or reading or lost in thought, but there was something else there too, a sadness that he'd put there. He typed out a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally, he settled on, "Thank you for letting me know. I'm glad you're safe." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'm coming back Friday. I think we should talk, really talk. No more avoiding." Mason's hands trembled as he typed, "Okay, come over Friday night, 8 p.m. I'll be there." The next few days passed with agonizing slowness. Mason went through his routine, but his mind was constantly on Friday night, on the conversation that would determine the rest of his life. He tried to prepare, to think through what he would say, but every scenario ended in hurt. If he committed to being a father to this baby, he'd be living his worst nightmare. Divided attention, stretched resources, the constant fear of failing. But if he walked away, even partially, he'd be abandoning his own child, and he'd lose Clara completely. There was no good choice. There was only the choice he could live with. Thursday night, Mason lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, still searching for an answer that made sense. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "I'm back in town. Still on for tomorrow?" "Yes, 8 p.m. "Mason?" "Yeah?" "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I don't regret us. Even with everything that's happened, I don't regret loving you." Mason felt his throat close up. He typed back, "I don't regret you either." It was the most honest thing he'd said in a week. Friday arrived with gray skies and a cold drizzle that matched Mason's mood perfectly. He dropped Lily off at school, went to work, and spent the entire day watching the clock tick toward 8 p.m. with a mixture of dread and desperate hope. At 6:30, he picked up Lily and took her to his friend David's house for a sleepover, something he'd arranged earlier in the week, knowing he and Clara needed privacy for whatever was about to happen. Lily hugged him extra tight before going inside. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Lily Bean." "Are you going to talk to Clara tonight?" "Yes, I am." "Tell her I miss her, and tell her I hope you two stop being sad." Mason felt his eyes sting. "I'll tell her." He drove home through the rain, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, his mind racing through every possible outcome. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his heart was pounding so hard he felt lightheaded. Mason went inside, changed into clean clothes, tidied the already tidy living room, and then stood in the middle of his house with nothing left to do but wait. At exactly 8 p.m., headlights swept across his window. Clara was here, and Mason still had no idea what he was going to say. Mason opened the door before Clara could knock, as if waiting those extra few seconds might shatter what little composure he'd managed to gather. She stood on his porch in the rain, her hair damp at the edges, wearing the same green jacket she'd worn on their first date. The sight of it, that specific jacket, that particular shade of forest green, sent a wave of memory crashing over him so intense he had to grip the doorframe. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, come in, you're getting wet." Clara stepped inside, and Mason caught the scent of rain and her vanilla perfume mixing together in a way that made his chest ache. She looked different somehow, not visibly pregnant yet, but there was something in her face, a weariness that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago, shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights that mirrored his own. "Lily's at a sleepover," Mason said, closing the door behind her. "I thought we should have privacy." That was thoughtful. Clara unwrapped her scarf, her movements careful and deliberate, like she was buying time. "She doing okay?" "She misses you. Asked me to tell you that." Something flickered across Clara's face, pain, maybe, or longing. "I miss her too." An awkward silence settled between them, heavy with everything unsaid over the past week. Mason gestured toward the living room. "Do you want something to drink? Tea? Water?" "Water would be good, actually. I've been constantly thirsty lately. Apparently that's a thing." She offered a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mason went to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with his hands. He filled 2 glasses with water, his mind spinning through opening lines for a conversation he had no idea how to have. When he returned to the living room, Clara was standing by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street, her arms wrapped around herself in that protective way he'd come to recognize. "Here." He handed her the glass, and their fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity through him, a reminder of all the casual touches they'd shared before everything got complicated. Her hand in his at the movies, her head on his shoulder while they watched TV, the way she'd curl against him in sleep. "Thank you." Clara took a long drink, then set the glass on the coffee table and turned to face him. "I've been rehearsing what to say all week. Had this whole speech planned out. But now I'm here and I can't remember any of it." "You don't need a speech." "Don't I?" She laughed, but it came out bitter. "Mason, we haven't spoken in a week except for a few text messages. I went to my parents' house because I couldn't stand being in the same city as you and not seeing you. And now I'm standing in your living room and you're looking at me like I'm a bomb that might explode, and I have no idea where to even start." Mason set his own glass down, running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit Clara had called him out on more than once. "I'm sorry for how I reacted, for telling you to leave. You were scared. I was terrified. I still am." "Of me? Or of the baby?" "Of everything." The admission came out raw and honest. Of failing, of not being enough, of history repeating itself. Clara's expression softened slightly. "Mason, I'm not Lily's mother. I'm not going to abandon you." "You don't know that." The words burst out before he could stop them. "You can't know that. People make promises all the time and then life gets hard and they leave anyway. My parents promised to stay together forever. Lily's mom promised she wanted to be a mother. And look how those turned out. So what, you just don't trust anyone ever? You just assume everyone will leave? It's safer that way." "Safer?" Clara's voice rose. "Mason, you can't build a life on fear of what might happen. You'll suffocate. You'll miss everything real and beautiful because you're too busy protecting yourself from hypothetical pain." "I'm protecting Lily." "Are you? Or are you using Lily as an excuse to keep everyone at arm's length?" The question hit him like a slap. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Clara took a step toward him, her eyes blazing now. "You're an amazing father. What you've done for Lily, the life you've built for her, it's incredible. But you've also used her as a shield. Every time we get close, every time I think maybe we're building something real, you pull back and remind me that Lily comes first. Which she should. I've never questioned that. But there's a difference between putting your daughter first and hiding behind her." Mason felt anger flare in his chest, hot and defensive. "You have no idea what it's like to raise a child alone. To know that one mistake could—" "You're right. I don't know. But I'm about to find out, aren't I?" Claire's voice cracked. "In 7 months, I'm going to be a single mother figuring it out alone because the man I love is too scared to take a risk. I told you from the beginning I didn't want more children, and I respected that. I was on birth control. We used protection. I did everything right, and it still happened, Mason. Life happened, and now we have to deal with it." "We?" "There's no we in this, Clara. You made the decision to keep the baby without me. Because it's my body." Her voice broke on the last word. "You think this was an easy choice? You think I wanted to be pregnant right now, knowing it would destroy everything we had? I spent 3 days crying in my childhood bedroom, trying to figure out if I could go through with an abortion just to keep you, and I couldn't. Not because I don't love you, I do, desperately, but because I couldn't live with that choice." Mason felt something crack inside him at the anguish in her voice. He'd been so focused on his own fear, his own pain, that he hadn't fully let himself see what this was costing her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know this isn't easy for you either." Clara wiped at her eyes, taking a shaky breath. "I didn't come here to fight with you." "Why did you come?" "Because we need to figure out what happens next. I meant what I said before. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to be, but I need to know one way or the other. I can't keep existing in this limbo, wondering if you're going to call, if you're going to show up, if you're going to decide you want to be part of this baby's life. I need certainty, even if that certainty is you walking away." Mason looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the strength it must have taken to stand in his living room and say those words, to offer him an out while her heart was breaking, to choose her own survival over waiting for him to figure out his feelings. "What if I can't give you certainty?" he asked. "What if I don't know what I want?" "Then you need to figure it out. But you can't take forever, Mason. I have decisions to make, doctor's appointments to schedule, plans to put in place, and I can't keep putting my life on hold while you decide if you're brave enough to be part of it." "That's not fair." "None of this is fair." Clara's composure finally shattered completely. "It's not fair that I fell in love with a man who's so damaged he can't see past his own fear. It's not fair that I'm pregnant with a baby I already love, but might have to raise alone. It's not fair that you're standing there looking at me like I'm asking for the impossible when all I want is for you to try. Just try, Mason. Take a leap of faith and trust that maybe, just maybe, this could work out." "And what happens when it doesn't? What happens when I fail you both? What happens when you don't?" Clara stepped closer, close enough that he could see the tears streaming down her face. "What if you're wrong? What if you're actually capable of more than you give yourself credit for? What if this baby isn't the end of everything but the beginning of something even better?" Mason wanted to believe her. Every part of him wanted to reach out, pull her close, and promise that everything would be okay. But the fear was too loud, drowning out every other instinct. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't be what you need." Clara's face crumpled, but she nodded slowly, accepting what he was saying even as it destroyed her. "Okay, then I need you to listen to me very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. When she spoke again, her voice was clear and firm despite the tears. "I'm going to have this baby. I'm going to love this baby with everything I have. I'm going to give them the best life I possibly can, with or without you. And if you decide someday that you want to be part of their life, we'll figure out what that looks like. Custody arrangements, child support, whatever the legal requirements are. But Mason, if you walk out that door right now, if you choose fear over us, then you don't get to come back later and play hero. You don't get to show up when it's convenient and expect me to welcome you with open arms. This is your moment, right now. This is when you choose." The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Mason felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a drop he couldn't measure. Jump and risk everything, or stay safe and lose her forever. "I need time," he heard himself say. Clara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. The hope that had been there, fragile and desperate, was gone, replaced by a resignation that made her look older somehow. "No, you don't. You've had time. What you need is courage, and I can't give you that. Nobody can." She picked up her purse from where she'd set it on the couch. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the legal stuff. Child support, paternity acknowledgement, all of that. We'll keep it professional and clean." "Clara, wait. No." She held up her hand, stopping him. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep hoping you'll change your mind, waiting for you to suddenly become brave enough to love me the way I love you. I have to protect myself now. I have to protect this baby." She moved toward the door, and Mason felt panic rise in his throat. This was it. The moment she walked out, everything would be over, not just their relationship, but any chance of repairing it. "I do love you," he said desperately. "That was never the question." Clara stopped with her hand on the doorknob, her back to him. "Love isn't enough if you're too scared to fight for it, and I'm done fighting alone." "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough?" She turned then, and the look on her face nearly broke him. It was equal parts love and grief, understanding and acceptance. "Then you're not the man I thought you were," she said softly. "The Mason I fell in love with was strong enough to raise a child alone, strong enough to build a good life from nothing, strong enough to let someone in despite every reason not to. That man could do this. The question is whether you believe you're that man. And if I don't, then I guess we have our answer." Clara opened the door, letting in a gust of cold, rain-scented air. She paused on the threshold, looking back at him one last time. "Lily asked me once if we were going to get married. I told her I didn't know, but that I hoped so. I wanted to spend my life with you, Mason. I wanted to blend our families and make something beautiful out of all our broken pieces. And I would have been a good mother to Lily. I would have loved her like she was mine. The past tense hit Mason like a physical blow. Would have been, would have loved. I know you would have, he managed, but I can't wait for you to figure out if you're brave enough to let me. Clara's voice broke. I have to go now. I have to start building a life that doesn't include you, because staying here, hoping you'll change, will kill me a little more every day. Clara, goodbye, Mason. She stepped out into the rain, and Mason stood frozen in his doorway, watching her walk to her car. Every instinct screamed at him to run after her, to call her back, to say something, anything that would make her stay. But his feet wouldn't move, his voice wouldn't work. Fear held him in place like chains. Clara got into her car without looking back. The engine started, the headlights cut through the darkness, and then she was pulling away from the curb, driving out of his life. Mason stood in the open doorway long after her taillights disappeared, rain blowing in and soaking his shirt, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. He'd done it. He'd let her go. He'd chosen safety over risk, control over chaos, fear over love, and it felt like dying. He finally closed the door and walked back into his empty house. Without Lily there, without Clara, the silence was suffocating. Mason sank onto the couch, dropping his head into his hands, and tried to convince himself he'd made the right choice. He'd protected himself. He'd protected Lily. He'd maintained the carefully ordered life they'd built. So why did he feel like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life? His phone buzzed. A text from David. Lily wants to say goodnight. A moment later, a video call request came through. Mason answered to find Lily's face filling the screen, her hair in pigtails, wearing pajamas with cartoon dinosaurs on them. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Lily Bean, having fun? Yeah, we made pizza and watched a movie, and now we're doing makeovers. Look! She turned her face to show off some very enthusiastic application of play makeup. Despite everything, Mason smiled. Very glamorous. Did you talk to Clara? The question caught him off guard. I did, yeah. Is she there? Can I say hi? She already left, sweetheart. Lily's face fell. Oh, did you tell her I miss her? I did. What did she say? She said she misses you too. Are you guys still taking a break? Mason felt his throat close up. How did he explain to his 7-year-old daughter that he'd just destroyed the best relationship either of them had ever had because he was too broken to take a risk? Yeah, baby, we're still taking a break. For how long? Forever, he thought. I don't know. Lily was quiet for a moment, studying his face through the screen with that unsettling perceptiveness of hers. You look really sad, Daddy. I'm okay. You always say that when you're not okay. Out of the mouths of babes, Mason tried to smile and failed. Sometimes grown-ups have to be sad for a little while. But I promise I'm going to be fine. Do you want me to come home? I can tell Mr. David's mom I want to come home and keep you company. The offer nearly undid him completely. Even at 7, Lily was trying to take care of him, to fix his pain, which was exactly backward from how it should be. No, sweetheart. You stay and have fun. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning, okay? Okay. But Daddy? Yeah? If you love Clara, you should tell her. Emma says her mom almost didn't marry her stepdad because he was scared, but then he told her he loved her, and now they're really happy. Mason felt something twist in his chest. It's a little more complicated than that, Lily Bean. Why do adults always make things complicated? That's an excellent question. I wish I had a good answer. They said their goodnights, and Mason ended the call to find himself alone again in the too-quiet house. He looked around at the life he'd built, orderly, controlled, safe, and felt the walls closing in. He'd lost Clara. He'd probably lost any chance of being part of his unborn child's life in any meaningful way. And for what? To maintain this illusion of control? To protect himself from a pain that was already tearing him apart? Mason stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street. Somewhere out there, Clara was driving home to her empty apartment, pregnant and alone, probably crying, definitely hurting. Because of him. Because he'd been too scared to be brave. His phone was in his hand before he consciously decided to pick it up. He pulled up Clara's number, his thumb hovering over the call button. What would he even say? I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please come back. Would that be enough? Could words fix what he'd just broken? The phone rang in his hand, startling him. Unknown number. Mason almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Mason Reed? Yes. Who's this? This is Dr. Sarah Chen from Portland Medical Center. I'm calling about Clara Bennett. She listed you as her emergency contact. Mason's blood turned to ice. What happened? Is she okay? She was in a minor car accident about 20 minutes ago. She's stable, but we'd like to keep her overnight for observation given her pregnancy. She's asking for you. The world tilted sideways. Clara was hurt. Clara was in the hospital, and she was asking for him. I'm on my way, Mason said, already grabbing his keys. Tell her I'm on my way. He was out the door and in his car before the doctor finished giving him the room number, his hands shaking as he started the engine. All the fear, all the careful reasoning, all the self-protective walls he'd built, none of it mattered now. The only thing that mattered was getting to Clara. The drive to the hospital felt endless, even though it was only 15 minutes. Mason's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if she was hurt worse than they were saying? What if something happened to the baby? What if he'd wasted his last chance to tell her how he really felt? He parked haphazardly and ran into the emergency room, barely pausing at the front desk before a nurse directed him to the 3rd floor. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding, his lungs burning. Room 314. He found it and pushed through the door to find Clara lying in a hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets. There was a bandage on her forehead and a heart monitor beeping steadily beside her. Mason, she whispered, and the relief in her voice nearly brought him to his knees. He crossed to her bedside in 3 long strides, taking her hand in his. I'm here. I'm here. What happened? Are you okay? Is the baby? The baby's fine. I'm fine, just shaken up. Her eyes filled with tears. I wasn't paying attention. I was crying, and the light turned red, and I didn't see it in time. The other car just clipped my bumper, but I hit my head on the steering wheel. Mason gently touched the bandage on her forehead, his hand trembling. Jesus, Clara. I'm so sorry. I know I said I didn't want you involved, but when they asked for an emergency contact, you were the only person I wanted. I shouldn't have called. I should have... Stop. Mason cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. I'm glad you called. I'm glad I'm here. And I'm so sorry. For what? For everything. For being scared. For pushing you away. For letting you leave tonight when every part of me wanted to beg you to stay. The words tumbled out, raw and desperate. Clara, I love you. I'm terrified and I have no idea how to do this, but I love you and I don't want to lose you. Clara's breath caught. Mason, let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. You were right about all of it. I've been hiding behind Lily, using my fear as an excuse to never risk anything. And tonight, when you walked out that door, I felt like I was dying. Because you're not just some woman I'm dating. You're the person who makes me want to be braver. You're the person who sees all my broken pieces and loves me anyway. I do love you, Clara whispered, even when you're being impossible. The baby, our baby, I'm still scared. I'm probably going to be scared for the next 18 years. But I'm more scared of a life without you in it. So if you'll let me, if you'll give me another chance, I want to try. I want to be there for doctor's appointments and midnight cravings and all of it. I want to do this with you. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Are you sure? Because I can't go through this again, Mason. I can't have you change your mind in a few weeks when the reality sets in. I won't change my mind. How do you know? Mason looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd crashed into his life and dismantled every defense he'd spent years building. And suddenly, he did know. Because when the hospital called and said you'd been in an accident, nothing else mattered. Not my fear, not my plans, not my need for control. All I could think was that I needed to get to you, that I couldn't lose you. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. That's how I know. Clara let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. You're sure you really want this? I want you. I want our baby. I want all of it, even the terrifying parts. Especially the terrifying parts because that means it's real. She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like salt and hope and second chances. When they broke apart, Mason rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. "We're really doing this," Clara whispered. "Yeah, we really are. You know this is going to be messy, right? And complicated. And nothing like your perfectly ordered life." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Mason thought about his answer carefully, because this was a promise he couldn't break. Not to her, not to their baby, not to himself. "I'm learning to be okay with it. I'm learning that love is worth the mess." Clara smiled through her tears, and in that moment, Mason felt something shift inside him. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there, but it no longer had the power to control him, because he'd chosen love, he'd chosen Clara. He'd chosen to be brave, and for the first time in 7 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. Mason stayed at the hospital through the night, dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable chair beside Clara's bed, jerking awake every time a nurse came in to check vitals or adjust monitors. Each time he opened his eyes, his first instinct was to make sure Clara was still there, still breathing, still real. The fear of losing her hadn't dissipated with his declaration of love. If anything, it had intensified now that he'd allowed himself to truly feel how much she meant to him. Around 4 a.m., Clara stirred and reached for his hand. "You're still here," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "Where else would I be?" Mason squeezed her fingers gently, careful of the IV taped to the back of her hand. "I don't know. I half expected to wake up and find out I dreamed the whole thing. You showing up, saying all those things." She turned her head to look at him in the dim light filtering through the doorway. "Did you mean it? All of it? Every word? Even the part about being scared for 18 years? Despite the exhaustion weighing on him, Mason smiled. "Especially that part. I'm pretty sure that's just called being a parent." Clara was quiet for a moment, studying his face. "What are we going to tell Lily?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Mason hadn't fully considered in his desperate rush to the hospital. Lily. His daughter, who'd already grown attached to Clara, who'd asked just hours ago if they were going to get married, who had no idea her world was about to expand in ways she couldn't imagine. "The truth," Mason said finally. Age-appropriate truth, but still the truth. She deserves that. She's going to have questions. She always has questions. That kid could interrogate a seasoned criminal and get a full confession. Mason ran his free hand through his hair. "But yeah, this is going to be complicated. She's been the center of my universe for 7 years. Now she has to share that space. You think she'll resent the baby? I think she'll adjust. Kids are resilient in ways adults forget to be." He paused, considering. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it, about her feeling displaced or less important." "Then we make sure she knows she's not," Clara said firmly. "We include her. We make her part of this from the beginning, not as a babysitter or a helper, but as a sister, as someone valuable." The word sister sent a strange flutter through Mason's chest. Lily was going to be a big sister. His carefully constructed family of 2 was about to become something bigger, messier, more complicated. The old Mason, the one from 2 weeks ago, would have panicked at the thought. But sitting here in the pre-dawn darkness, holding Clara's hand while monitors beeped steadily in the background, he found the idea less terrifying than he'd expected. Different, yes. Challenging, absolutely. But maybe, just maybe, also beautiful. The doctor released Clara late the next morning with instructions to rest and follow up with her obstetrician within the week. Mason drove her back to her apartment, his hand finding hers across the center console, as if maintaining physical contact might somehow prove this was all real. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked as he pulled into her parking lot. "I can make you lunch? Make sure you're settled." "Don't you need to pick up Lily?" Mason glanced at the dashboard clock. 11:23 a.m. David had texted earlier saying Lily was having a great time and could stay until afternoon if needed. "I have a few hours. David's not expecting me until 2. Clara nodded, and something in her expression made Mason's chest tighten. She looked vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen, the bandage on her forehead a stark reminder of how quickly everything could change, how fragile this all was. They made their way up to her third-floor apartment, Clara moving slowly, still sore from the accident, Once inside, Mason was struck by how much he'd missed this space. The north-facing windows that filled the main room with soft light, the half-finished canvases stacked against the walls, the organized chaos of art supplies and books and plants thriving in ceramic pots. "Sit," he instructed, guiding Clara to the couch. "I'll make tea." "Bossy," she said, but she was smiling as she sank into the cushions. Mason moved through her small kitchen with the familiarity of someone who'd spent countless mornings here, putting the kettle on, finding her favorite mug, the oversized blue one with "Nevertheless, she persisted" printed on the side. When the tea was ready, he brought it to her along with a glass of water and the prenatal vitamins he'd spotted on her counter. "You've been taking these?" he asked, holding up the bottle. Clara took them from him, looking slightly embarrassed. "Started the day after I found out. Figured I should probably do things right from the beginning." Mason sat beside her, watching as she took the vitamin and sipped her tea. There was something surreal about this moment, the mundane domesticity of it, the quiet intimacy. 24 hours ago, he'd thought he'd lost her forever. Now here they were, sitting in her apartment, making plans for a future he'd been too scared to imagine. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, catching him staring. "That I'm an idiot." "Well, yes, but specifically?" He huffed out a laugh. "I'm thinking about all the time I wasted being scared, all the moments I could have had with you if I'd just been brave enough to take the risk. You're here now, that's what matters. Is it enough? After everything I put you through?" Clara set down her mug and turned to face him fully. "Mason, I'm not going to pretend the last 2 weeks didn't hurt. They did. A lot. But I also understand where you were coming from. Fear isn't rational, and trauma doesn't just disappear because we want it to. You're here now because you chose to be, and that means something. I want to do better, be better, for you, for the baby, for Lily. Then start by forgiving yourself for being human." She reached out and cupped his face in her hand. "You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to mess up sometimes. What matters is what you do after." Mason leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. "I don't deserve you." Lucky for you, love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Clara's hand eventually finding its way to his, their fingers interlacing in a gesture that felt both familiar and new. Mason thought about the road ahead, doctor's appointments, telling Lily, figuring out logistics, preparing for a baby he still couldn't quite wrap his mind around. The old fear tried to claw its way back up his throat, but he pushed it down, focusing instead on the warmth of Clara's hand in his. "I should pick up Lily," he said reluctantly, checking his phone. "But I'll come back tonight if you want. Bring dinner." "I'd like that. Maybe we can start talking about how we're going to do this, practically, I mean. Living situations, finances, all the boring adult stuff." Mason nodded, though the mention of practical details sent a fresh wave of anxiety through him. They had so much to figure out, but they'd figure it out together. That was the difference now. He kissed Clara goodbye at her door, a soft, lingering kiss that carried promises neither of them had words for yet. As he drove to David's house to pick up Lily, Mason rehearsed different ways to tell his daughter about the baby. Every version sounded wrong in his head, too clinical, too casual, too complicated for a 7-year-old to process. Lily came bounding out of David's house when she saw Mason's car, her overnight bag bouncing against her leg, her face lit up with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. Looking at her, Mason felt his heart squeeze with a fierce protectiveness that was so familiar it ached. "Daddy, we made pancakes shaped like animals, and I made an elephant, but it kind of looked like a blob, and then we played board games, and I won twice." "Sounds like you had a great time." Mason helped her into the back seat, buckling her in. "I did. Did you have a good night?" Mason paused, his hand stilling on the seatbelt. This was it, the moment where everything changed. "Actually, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something. Can we wait until we get home?" Lily's expression shifted from excitement to concern. "Is it bad?" "No, it's not bad. It's just important, okay?" "Okay," she said uncertainly. The drive home felt both too long and too short. Mason's mind raced through his planned speech, But the words kept rearranging themselves, refusing to settle into anything coherent. When they pulled into the driveway, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, picking up on his nervous energy the way she always did. Inside, Mason made them both hot chocolate, something he only did on special occasions or when difficult conversations loomed. Lily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs, watching him with those perceptive gray-green eyes that missed nothing. "Am I in trouble?" she asked as he set the mug in front of her. "No, baby, you're not in trouble, I promise." Mason sat down across from her, wrapping his hands around his own mug for something to hold on to. "Remember how I told you Clara and I were taking a break to think about things?" "Yeah, did you stop taking a break?" "Yes. Clara and I talked last night, and we're going to keep being together." Lily brightened immediately. "Really? That's great. Can we do the Saturday market thing now?" "We can definitely do that, but there's something else I need to tell you, and I need you to really listen, okay?" His serious tone made Lily sit up straighter, her hot chocolate forgotten. "Okay." Mason took a deep breath. Here it was, the moment his daughter's world expanded, whether she was ready for it or not. "Clara is going to have a baby, and that baby is going to be your brother or sister." Lily blinked at him, processing. "Like a real baby?" "Yes, a real baby." "Where did it come from?" Despite the tension, Mason almost smiled. "Well, when two people love each other very much." "No, I know that part. Emma told me. I mean, when did it happen?" "A few weeks ago. Clara just found out recently." "Is that why you were sad? Because of the baby?" The question cut right to the heart of it, and Mason decided honesty was the only way forward. "Yeah, it is. I was scared about having another baby because taking care of you has been the most important thing in my life, and I was worried that having another kid might change that." "But you're not scared anymore?" "I'm still scared," Mason admitted, "but I realize that being scared isn't a good enough reason to push away people I love. And I love Clara. And I'm going to love this baby too." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious as she worked through this information. "Will you still have time for me?" There it was, the fear Mason had been most worried about, voiced with heartbreaking directness. "Lily Bean, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "You are my daughter. You are my first baby, and you will always, always be one of the most important people in my life. Nothing, not this new baby, not anything, is going to change how much I love you. Do you understand?" But babies need lots of attention. Emma's mom had a baby last year, and Emma said her mom is always tired and doesn't play with her as much. That's true. Babies do need a lot of attention. And yes, things are going to change, but change doesn't mean I'll love you less. It just means our family is getting bigger. So I'll be a big sister? Yes. How do you feel about that? Lily picked up her mug, taking a thoughtful sip of hot chocolate. When she set it down, her upper lip had a chocolate mustache that made her look even younger than 7. "I don't know yet. Can I think about it?" The response was so mature, so measured, that Mason felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. When had his little girl gotten old enough to need time to process complex emotions? "Of course you can think about it, and you can ask me any questions you have whenever you have them. This is new for all of us." "Is Clara going to live here?" "We haven't figured that out yet. We're going to talk about it. If she does, where will the baby sleep?" Mason glanced toward the small second bedroom that currently served as his home office. "Probably in the spare room. I'd have to move my work stuff." "Can I help decorate? The baby's room?" The question caught Mason off guard. "You want to help?" "Well, yeah. If I'm going to be a big sister, I should probably make sure the baby knows I'm nice and stuff. Emma said you have to be nice to babies, or they cry all the time." Mason felt something warm unfold in his chest. Here was his daughter, processing information that could have made her resentful or scared, and her first instinct was to be welcoming. Maybe he'd done something right after all. "I think that's a great idea, and I bet Clara would love your help." "When can we tell her?" "Tell who what?" "Tell Clara that I want to help. Can we call her?" Mason pulled out his phone, his throat tight with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart, we can call her right now." Clara answered on the second ring, and Mason switched to video so Lily could see her. When Clara's face appeared on the screen, bandage on her forehead, hair pulled back, looking tired but happy, Lily's face lit up. Hi, Clara. Daddy told me about the baby. Clara's eyes widened slightly, flicking to Mason before returning to Lily. He did? What do you think? I think I'm going to be a good big sister, and I want to help decorate the baby's room. Can I? Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her hand to her mouth for a moment before speaking. Lily, I would absolutely love your help. You have such good ideas about colors and art. I know lots about babies too. Emma has a baby brother and she taught me stuff. Like, you have to support their head because it's wobbly. That's very true. It sounds like you're going to be an excellent big sister. They talked for a few more minutes, Lily's enthusiasm building as she asked questions about when the baby would be born and whether it would be a boy or girl and if they could teach it to paint. Mason watched his daughter and the woman he loved talking about their future together and felt something settle into place in his chest. This was his family now, complicated, imperfect, and slightly terrifying, but his. After the call ended, Lily went to her room to draw pictures for the baby, so it knows me when it's born, leaving Mason alone in the kitchen with his thoughts. He texted Clara. Thank you for being so good with her. Her response came quickly. She's an amazing kid. You raised her well. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Yeah, I think we are. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Mason went to Clara's first prenatal appointment, sitting in the waiting room flipping through parenting magazines with articles about sleep training and developmental milestones that made his head spin. When they called Clara back, she reached for his hand, and he followed her into the examination room with his heart hammering. The ultrasound technician was a cheerful woman named Denise, who talked them through everything she was doing as she moved the wand across Clara's barely there baby bump. Mason stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the grainy black and white images. There's your baby, Denise said, pointing to what looked like a blob with a flickering center, and that's the heartbeat. The world stopped. That tiny flicker, barely visible, impossibly fragile, was his child's heart beating. Mason felt Clara squeeze his hand, and when he looked at her, tears were streaming down her face. Is everything okay? Clara asked, her voice shaky. Everything looks perfect. You're measuring about 9 weeks along, which lines up with your dates. Baby looks healthy and right on track. 9 weeks. Mason did the math quickly in his head. 9 weeks ago, he'd had no idea his life was about to change irrevocably. 9 weeks ago, this tiny person didn't exist, and now here they were, heart beating, cells dividing, becoming more real by the second. Would you like pictures? Denise asked. Yes, Clara and Mason said simultaneously. They left the appointment with grainy ultrasound photos and a due date, October 15th. Mason stared at the photos in his car, unable to quite believe that the blob on the thermal paper was going to become a whole person he'd be responsible for. You okay? Clara asked, watching him. I'm terrified, he admitted, but in a different way than before. Before, I was scared of the idea of a baby. Now I'm scared of messing up this specific baby. That's called being a parent. How are you so calm about this? Clara laughed, though it came out slightly hysterical. I'm not calm. I'm pretending to be calm. Inside, I'm screaming constantly, but I'm also excited, which is confusing. Mason reached across the console and took her hand. We're going to figure this out together. Promise? Promise. They drove to Mason's house, where Lily was waiting with Mason's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to watch her for the appointment. Lily practically launched herself at Clara when they walked in. Did you see the baby? Do you have pictures? Is it a boy or a girl? Clara knelt down to Lily's level, pulling out the ultrasound photos. We did see the baby. It's too early to tell if it's a boy or girl yet, but look, you can see the heartbeat right here. Lily peered at the photo, her nose scrunched up in concentration. It looks like a blob. It does right now, but it's growing every day. In a few months, it'll look more like a baby. Can I keep this picture? To show Emma. Clara glanced at Mason, who nodded. Sure, you can keep one. Just take good care of it, okay? I will. I'm going to put it in my special box. Lily ran off to her room, clutching the ultrasound photo like it was treasure. Mrs. Chen left with a knowing smile and a promise to bring over some soup later. Good for pregnancy, she insisted, leaving Mason and Clara alone in the living room. That went well, Clara said, sinking onto the couch. Better than I expected, honestly. I was worried she'd be more resistant. Kids adapt faster than adults. We're the ones who make it complicated. Mason sat beside her, pulling her against his side. She fit there perfectly, her head on his shoulder, and he wondered how he'd ever thought he could live without this. Over the following weeks, they settled into a new normal. Clara spent more nights at Mason's house, her toothbrush appearing in his bathroom, her favorite tea taking up space in his cupboards. They talked about the logistics. She'd keep her apartment for now, but they'd start looking for a bigger place, somewhere with room for all of them. Mason's house, with its 2 small bedrooms, suddenly felt inadequate. They'd need space for the baby, a room for Lily that didn't require her to downsize, maybe a yard where kids could play. The thought of moving, of uprooting the carefully constructed life he'd built, would have sent him into a panic spiral a month ago. Now, he found himself scrolling through real estate listings late at night, imagining Clara's art supplies spread across a sunlit studio, Lily running through a backyard, a nursery with soft yellow walls. The first time Clara stayed over while Lily was home, Mason watched his daughter carefully for signs of discomfort or resentment. But Lily seemed thrilled to have Clara there, dragging her into elaborate games of pretend and showing her every drawing she'd ever made. "She's really okay with this," Clara whispered that night, after they'd tucked Lily in and retreated to Mason's bedroom, door open, keeping things appropriate with his daughter down the hall. "I think she's been lonely," Mason said, the realization hitting him as he spoke it. "I've tried so hard to be enough for her, but maybe she needed more than just me." "You are enough. You've always been enough. But every kid deserves a village, and I'm honored to be part of hers." They lay in the dark, Clara's head on his chest, and Mason felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, white-knuckled hope of someone trying to control an uncontrollable situation, but the quiet, steady hope of someone learning to trust the process. Clara's body started changing in small ways that made the pregnancy more real. A slight rounding of her belly that she complained made her jeans tight. A glow to her skin that he swore wasn't just his imagination. She was sick some mornings, and Mason learned to keep ginger tea stocked and crackers by the bed. One Saturday in late March, they took Lily to the Children's Museum, the 3 of them wandering through exhibits about dinosaurs and space and the human body. Mason watched Clara and Lily examining a display about butterfly metamorphosis, their heads bent together, and felt his heart expand in his chest. This was his family, this messy, imperfect, beautiful family. "Daddy, look!" Lily called, pointing to a cocoon in the butterfly garden. "Clara says the butterfly is almost ready to come out." Mason joined them, wrapping his arm around Clara's waist in a gesture that was becoming natural. "How can you tell? See how the cocoon is moving? That means it's breaking through." They watched in silence as the cocoon split, a damp, crumpled butterfly slowly emerging. It took time. The process wasn't quick or clean, but gradually, the butterfly's wings unfurled, still wet and wrinkled, but unmistakably beautiful. "It has to struggle to get out," Clara said softly. "If you help it, if you break open the cocoon for it, the butterfly won't be strong enough to fly. The struggle is what makes it ready." Mason looked at her and saw she wasn't just talking about butterflies. The struggle was what made you ready. The fear, the uncertainty, the hard conversations and harder choices, all of it was part of becoming something new. He'd been so afraid of the struggle that he'd almost missed the transformation entirely. "I love you," he said, not caring that they were in a crowded museum surrounded by families and screaming children. Clara turned to him, her eyes bright. "I love you too." "Gross," Lily said, but she was grinning. "Can we go see the dinosaurs now?" That night, after Lily was asleep and Clara was dozing on the couch, Mason pulled out his laptop and did something he'd been putting off. He started researching how to be a good father to a newborn. Not from a place of fear this time, but from genuine desire to do it right. He read articles about bonding and feeding schedules and the importance of skin-to-skin contact. He made notes, created spreadsheets, because some habits die hard, and felt the knot of anxiety in his chest slowly loosen. He could do this. They could do this. Together. The months that followed were a masterclass in letting go of control. Clara officially moved into Mason's house in late April, her belongings blending with his in ways that should have felt invasive but instead felt right. Her paintings leaned against walls in the spare bedroom-turned office. Her books filled the gaps on his shelves. Her laughter filled spaces that had been too quiet for too long. They decided to wait on buying a bigger house until after the baby was born, a practical decision that Mason appreciated even as he recognized his old need for planning trying to reassert itself. But Clara had gently reminded him that they didn't need to have everything figured out immediately, and he was learning, slowly, imperfectly, to trust that. The second trimester brought relief from Clara's morning sickness and a visible baby bump that Lily was fascinated by. She'd taken to talking to Clara's stomach at night, telling the baby stories about school and her friends and all the things they'd do together when it was born. "Do you think the baby can hear me?" Lily asked one evening in May, her small hand pressed against Clara's belly as they sat on the couch. "The doctors say babies can start hearing sounds around 20 weeks, so probably," Clara said, running her fingers through Lily's hair. "What should I tell it?" "Whatever you want. Tell it about your day." Lily leaned closer to Clara's stomach, her voice taking on a conspiratorial whisper. "Okay, baby, so today at school, Emma and I found a caterpillar during recess, and Mrs. Patterson said we could keep it in a jar to watch it turn into a butterfly. And Daddy says that's called metamorphosis, which is a really big word. You're going through metamorphosis too, except you're turning into a person instead of a butterfly, which is way cooler." Mason watched from the kitchen doorway, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. This, his daughter talking to his unborn child, Clara smiling with her hand resting on her growing belly, the evening light streaming through windows of a house that finally felt like a home instead of just a shelter. This was everything he'd been too afraid to want. "You're staring again," Clara said, catching his eye. "Can't help it. You're beautiful. I'm enormous. You're 5 months pregnant, you're supposed to be getting bigger, and you're still beautiful." Lily wrinkled her nose. "You guys are gross." "You'll understand when you're older," Mason said, coming to sit beside them. "That's what adults always say when they don't want to explain things." Clara laughed. "She's got you there." In June, they found out they were having a boy. Mason felt the news settle over him with surprising weight. A son. He'd have a son. The thought brought a fresh wave of anxiety about all the ways he could fail, all the lessons he'd need to teach, all the moments he might get wrong. But it also brought a fierce determination. He would do better by this child than his own father had done by him. He would be present, engaged, unafraid to show love. He would break the cycle of emotional distance that had marked his own childhood. "You okay?" Claire asked as they drove home from the ultrasound appointment, the news still fresh between them. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how I want to be the kind of father who's not afraid to say I love you. The kind who shows up to every baseball game or piano recital or whatever he ends up being into. The kind who doesn't disappear behind a newspaper at dinner or use work as an excuse to avoid real conversations." Claire reached across the console and squeezed his hand. "You already are that kind of father. Look at how you are with Lily." "I had to be. I was all she had. All." "No, Mason. You chose to be. You could have been present without being emotionally available. You could have provided for her physical needs without meeting her emotional ones. But you didn't. You showed up for her completely, even when it was hard. You'll do the same for our son." Our son. The words sent a shiver through him. They'd started referring to the baby with possessive pronouns, our son, our family, our future. And each time it felt a little more real, a little less terrifying. When they told Lily she was going to have a baby brother, she had opinions. "A brother? Are you sure it's not a sister?" "Pretty sure, sweetheart. The ultrasound was very clear," Mason said. Lily processed this information with the seriousness of someone receiving major news. "Okay, I guess brothers can be cool too. Emma has a brother and she says he's annoying, but also sometimes he shares his candy." "That's a fair assessment of siblings in general," Clara said, trying not to laugh. "Can we name him something cool? Not something boring like John or Mike." "What would you consider cool?" "I don't know, like Phoenix or Arrow or something that sounds like a superhero." Mason and Clara exchanged glances, both clearly trying not to smile. "We'll definitely take your suggestions into consideration," Mason said diplomatically. They spent the next few weeks debating names, a task that proved more difficult than Mason had anticipated. Clara liked classic names with meaning: James, William, Thomas. Mason found himself drawn to less common choices: Owen, Elliot, Finn. Lily lobbied hard for increasingly creative options: Maximus, Storm, Rocket, that they gently vetoed while praising her creativity. Finally, one night in early July, as they lay in bed with the windows open to catch the evening breeze, Clara said, "What about Alexander? We could call him Alex for short." "Alexander Reed." Mason tested the name, feeling how it sounded. "I like it. What does it mean?" "Defender of men. Protector." Mason felt something click into place. "Alexander Mason Reed. We could give him my name as his middle name." "I love that." Clara shifted, trying to find a comfortable position with her expanding belly. Lily might be disappointed it's not a superhero name, though. "We'll tell her Alex can be short for Alexander the Great, who was basically a superhero in ancient times." "You're getting good at this parenting negotiation thing." "I've had 7 years of practice with one very opinionated kid." They told Lily the next morning over breakfast, bracing for potential disappointment, but she surprised them. "Alexander? Like the Great?" "Exactly like the Great," Mason confirmed. "That's actually pretty cool. Can we call him Alex?" "That's the plan." "Okay, I approve." Lily took a triumphant bite of her cereal, as if her approval had been the final hurdle. As summer progressed and Clara's due date drew closer, Mason found himself facing fears he'd buried for years. Late one night in August, unable to sleep, he'd gotten up and gone to what would be the nursery, the former spare bedroom they'd been slowly converting. They'd painted the walls a soft blue-gray, assembled a crib that had taken 3 hours and significant cursing, and started accumulating the bewildering array of items a newborn apparently required. Mason stood in the doorway, looking at the room in the ambient light from the hallway, and felt panic rise in his throat. In less than 2 months, there would be a tiny human in that crib, dependent on him for everything, and what if he forgot something crucial? What if he made a mistake that couldn't be undone? "Can't sleep either?" Claire's voice came from behind him. Mason turned to find her in one of his t-shirts, her hand resting on her belly, her hair messy from sleep. "Did I wake you?" "No, your son is using my bladder as a punching bag. 4th bathroom trip tonight." She came to stand beside him, leaning against the door frame. "What are you thinking about?" "All the ways I could fail him." "Like what?" "Like what if I don't hear him crying in the middle of the night? What if I forget to burp him and he gets sick? What if I hold him wrong, or feed him wrong, or miss some developmental milestone that indicates a problem?" Clara was quiet for a moment, then said, "When Lily was born, what was your biggest fear?" "That I wouldn't be able to keep her alive." "And did you?" "Obviously, yes, but no buts. You were 27 years old, alone, terrified, and you kept a helpless infant alive. You didn't just keep her alive, you raised an amazing, kind, emotionally intelligent kid who knows she's loved unconditionally. What makes you think you can't do it again?" "Because this time I should know what I'm doing. With Lily, I had the excuse of being clueless. This time, if I mess up, it's because I actually failed." "Mason, look at me." Clara waited until he met her eyes. "You're going to mess up. I'm going to mess up. Every parent messes up. But our son is going to have 2 parents who love him, a big sister who's already devoted to him, and a home full of people who will catch him when he falls. That's more than enough." "What if it's not?" "Then we figure it out together. That's what we've been doing all along, isn't it? Figuring it out together?" Mason pulled her close, careful of her belly, and buried his face in her hair. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You let me steal your coffee and didn't get mad about it. Everything else followed naturally." He laughed despite himself. "Best decision I ever made, not being mad about that coffee." The next morning, Mason woke to find Clara sitting up in bed, her hand on her belly, a strange expression on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately alert. "Nothing's wrong. Here, feel this." She grabbed his hand and placed it on the side of her stomach. Mason felt it immediately, a strong, definite push against his palm from the inside. That's your son saying good morning." Clara smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "He's been kicking all morning, harder than usual. I think he knows you're here." Mason kept his hand on her belly, feeling the baby move, and something fundamental shifted inside him. This wasn't an abstract concept anymore, or a grainy image on an ultrasound screen. This was his son, alive and active, already making his presence known, real in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to his heart. "Hey, buddy," Mason said softly, speaking to Clara's stomach. "I'm your dad. I'm scared out of my mind about meeting you, but I promise I'm going to try my best. And your sister Lily can't wait to meet you." She's been practicing her big sister skills on every stuffed animal in the house. The baby kicked again, as if in response, and Mason felt Clara's hand cover his. "We're really doing this," she whispered. "Yeah, we really are." They spent the rest of August preparing. Mason baby-proofed the house with an intensity that Clara teased him about, but secretly appreciated. They took a childbirth class at the hospital where couples in various stages of pregnancy learned breathing techniques and pain management strategies. Mason took notes like he was studying for a final exam, determined to be as prepared as possible. Lily started second grade in September, full of excitement about telling her classmates she was going to be a big sister. Mason stood at the bus stop that first morning, watching her climb aboard with her new backpack, and felt time moving too fast and too slow simultaneously. "You okay?" Clara asked, sliding her hand into his. She was a week away from her due date, moving carefully, her ankles swollen and her back aching. "Just thinking about how fast she's growing up. Feels like yesterday she was the one I was terrified of screwing up. And look how well that turned out." "Yeah," Mason said, watching the bus pull away. "Yeah, I guess it did." Clara went into labor on October 13th, 2 days before her due date, at 3 in the morning. Mason woke to her shaking his shoulder, her voice tight with pain. "Mason, it's time." He was out of bed in seconds, his carefully prepared hospital bag already packed and waiting by the door. He woke Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to stay with Lily, then helped Clara to the car, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the seatbelt. "Breathe," Clara said through a contraction. "You're supposed to be the calm one." "Right, breathing. I can do breathing." But his heart was hammering so hard he could barely hear over it. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Mason held Clara's hand through contractions, murmuring encouragement while internally panicking about every possible complication. By the time they got to the maternity ward and Clara was settled in a room, his shirt was soaked through with nervous sweat. "Mr. Reed, you're going to want to breathe too," the nurse said kindly, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "Can't have you passing out on us. Sorry, I'm just terrified." "We know." "First baby?" "Second, but it's been 7 years." "Ah, so you've forgotten how intense it is. Don't worry, you'll do fine." But as Clara's labor progressed and the contractions got stronger, Mason felt control slipping away in a way that made his chest tight. He couldn't fix this. He couldn't make it easier or faster or less painful. All he could do was be there, hold her hand, let her squeeze his fingers until they went numb, and watch the woman he loved go through something he couldn't protect her from. "I can't do this," Clara gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. "Mason, I can't." "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. You've got this." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one." She broke off with a cry of pain. 12 hours later, exhausted and drained, Clara was finally ready to push. Mason stood beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other holding her hand, and felt like he was living through the most terrifying, beautiful moment of his life. "One more push," the doctor encouraged. "Come on, Clara. You're almost there." Clara bore down with a guttural cry, and suddenly there was a baby, their son, red and squalling and absolutely perfect. The doctor laid him on Clara's chest, and Mason felt tears streaming down his face before he even realized he was crying. "He's here," Clara sobbed, her hands coming up to cradle the baby. "Oh my God, he's really here." 7 pounds, 6 ounces, the nurse announced. "Good, healthy boy." Alexander Mason Reed opened his eyes and looked straight at his mother, and Mason felt his heart crack wide open in a way it hadn't since the first time he'd held Lily. This was his son. This tiny, perfect human was his son. "Do you want to cut the cord, Dad?" the doctor asked. Mason nodded, unable to speak, and took the scissors with shaking hands. The simple act of severing that physical connection felt monumental, like officially welcoming Alex into the world as a separate being. After the nurses cleaned Alex up and wrapped him in a hospital blanket, they handed him to Mason. He cradled his son against his chest, marveling at how small he was, how fragile, how utterly dependent. "Hey, buddy," Mason whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm your dad. I know I'm terrified and I'll probably mess up 1,000 times, but I promise I'll always show up for you. I promise I'll always love you." Alex made a small sound, his tiny fist curling against Mason's shirt, and Mason felt every wall he'd ever built to protect himself crumble to dust. This was love without conditions, without fear, without the need to control the outcome. This was just love, pure and simple and overwhelming. "He looks like you," Clara said from the bed, her voice exhausted but happy. "You think?" Same nose, same serious expression. Mason looked down at his son and saw it, the family resemblance that tied them together across generations. His father's nose, his mother's chin, features that had been passed down and would continue forward. "I'm going to do better by you than they did by me," Mason promised quietly. "You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, knowing you matter, knowing it's okay to be scared as long as you don't let fear stop you from living." The next morning, Mason brought Lily to the hospital to meet her brother. She was bouncing with excitement, clutching a stuffed elephant she'd picked out for Alex. "So he has a friend, like I have Mr. Trunks." "Remember what we talked about," Mason said as they walked down the hospital corridor. "Gentle touches, quiet voices. He's very small." "I know, Daddy. I'll be careful." But when they entered the room and Lily saw Clara holding the baby, all her practiced calm evaporated. "He's so tiny. Can I hold him, please?" Clara smiled, exhausted but radiant. "Of course you can. Come sit here beside me." Mason helped Lily climb onto the bed, positioning her carefully with pillows supporting her arms. Then Clara gently transferred Alex into his big sister's arms, and Mason grabbed his phone to capture the moment. Lily's face full of wonder and fierce protectiveness, Alex tiny and peaceful in her embrace. "Hi, Alex," Lily whispered. "I'm your big sister, Lily. I've been waiting so long to meet you. I'm going to teach you so many things, like how to draw and how to make Dad laugh when he's being too serious. We're going to be best friends, okay?" Alex yawned, his tiny mouth opening wide, and Lily giggled. "He's perfect, Daddy. Can we keep him?" Mason laughed, the sound breaking through the emotion clogging his throat. "Yeah, sweetheart. We're definitely keeping him." They stayed like that for a while. Clara in the hospital bed, Lily holding her baby brother, Mason standing beside them. And he thought about how far they'd come from that night in his living room when Clara had told him she was pregnant and his world had tilted sideways. He'd been so afraid of failing, of being hurt, of losing control, of not being enough. But fear had almost cost him everything. Later that afternoon, after Lily had reluctantly left with Mrs. Chen, Mason sat in the chair beside Clara's bed, holding Alex while Clara slept. The baby was awake but quiet, his dark eyes seeming to study Mason's face with impossible focus. "Your mom says I was scared," Mason told his son softly. "And she was right. I was terrified of you before you even existed, terrified of what having you would mean, how it would change everything, whether I could handle it." Alex made a small noise, his fingers curling and uncurling. "But here's what I've learned. Love doesn't shrink when you share it. It expands. I didn't love Lily less when I fell for your mom, and I won't love either of them less now that you're here. My heart just got bigger to make room for you." The baby yawned again, his eyes starting to drift closed. "I'm still scared," Mason continued. "Probably always will be. But I'm more scared of what I'd lose if I let that fear win. I almost lost your mom because I was too afraid to take a risk. Almost missed out on all of this because I couldn't see past my own trauma." He stood carefully, walking to the window with Alex in his arms. Outside, the October afternoon was clear and bright, the kind of day that felt full of possibility. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to remember it even though you won't understand it for years. The moment I thought was the ending, the moment your mom told me you existed and I panicked, that wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The beginning of learning how to be brave. The beginning of understanding that the best things in life are the ones that scare you most." Mason looked down at his son, at this tiny person who'd forced him to confront every fear he'd been carrying, and felt tears slip down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered, Thank you for making me brave enough to love you." 3 days later, they brought Alex home. Mason carried the car seat into the house with the precious cargo of his sleeping son, while Clara followed more slowly, still recovering. Lily had decorated the living room with a banner she'd made at school. "Welcome home, Alex," complete with hand-drawn stars and hearts. Over the weeks that followed, Mason discovered that having a newborn the second time around was both easier and harder than the first. Easier because he knew the basics: how to change a diaper, how to swaddle, how to soothe a crying baby. Harder because he was older, more tired, and splitting his attention between a newborn and a second grader who still needed him. But they figured it out. They always figured it out. Clara would nurse Alex in the middle of the night while Mason sat beside her, both of them half asleep and grateful for each other's presence. Lily would help with small tasks, fetching diapers, singing to her brother when he was fussy, reading him stories even though he couldn't understand them yet. "You're doing it again," Clara said one night, catching Mason staring at them. Alex sleeping in his bassinet, Lily curled up on the couch with a book, Clara folding laundry. "Doing what?" "Looking at us like you can't believe we're real." Mason crossed to her, taking the onesie she was folding and setting it aside so he could pull her into his arms. "I can't believe you're real. I can't believe I almost let fear cost me all of this." "But you didn't. That's what matters." "I love you," he said, the words coming easier now than they ever had. "I love you, and I'm so grateful you didn't give up on me even when I was too scared to fight for us. I love you too. Even when you're overthinking everything and making spreadsheets for the baby's feeding schedule. The spreadsheet is helpful. The spreadsheet is very you, and I love that about you." They stood together in their slightly messy living room, holding each other while their son slept and their daughter read. And Mason thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a stolen coffee to an accidental pregnancy to a family that looked nothing like what he'd planned, but everything like what he needed. 4 years later, Mason stood in the backyard of the house they'd bought when Alex was 6 months old, a 3-bedroom rambler with a big yard and enough space for everyone. The October afternoon was perfect, warm but not hot, with leaves just starting to turn. Alex, now 4, was chasing Lily around the yard, both of them shrieking with laughter. At 11, Lily had hit that awkward preteen stage where she was too cool for most things, but she still made time to play with her little brother, who adored her with the single-minded devotion only a younger sibling could muster. "Lily, watch this," Alex called, attempting a cartwheel that ended with him tumbling into the grass. "Almost. Try keeping your legs straighter," Lily instructed, demonstrating a perfect cartwheel. Clara emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade, her hair pulled back, wearing one of Mason's old t-shirts and paint-stained jeans. She'd converted the garage into a studio and spent her free time creating art that she occasionally sold at local galleries. "Drinks!" she called, and both kids came running. Mason watched them, his family, and felt that familiar rush of gratitude that never quite went away. This life, this chaotic, messy, beautiful life, was everything he'd been too scared to dream of. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked, settling onto the porch step beside him. "About how different things could have been. If you'd let me walk away that night. If I'd been too much of a coward to show up at the hospital. But you did show up. You chose us. Best decision I ever made." "Even better than not being mad about the stolen coffee? Even better than that." Alex ran over, his face flushed and happy. "Daddy, watch me do a cartwheel." "I'm watching, buddy." Alex attempted another cartwheel, this one slightly better than the last, and Mason applauded enthusiastically. "Did you see? Did you see how straight my legs were?" "Very straight. You're getting good." "Lily's teaching me. She says by the time I'm in kindergarten, I'll be able to do backflips." "Let's maybe stick with cartwheels for now," Mason said, shooting Lily a look. She grinned, unrepentant. "I said maybe backflips." As the afternoon wore on and the light turned golden, Mason thought about the question Clara had asked him years ago in his living room when everything was falling apart. What if you're wrong? What if you're actually capable of more than you give yourself credit for? He'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong about his capacity to love more than one person fully. Wrong about change being something to fear. Wrong about needing to control every variable to feel safe. But he'd been right about one thing. Love was scary. Loving someone, really loving them, meant accepting that you couldn't protect them from everything, that you might fail them, that the whole beautiful, terrifying thing might fall apart despite your best efforts. The difference was, now he knew that being scared wasn't a good enough reason to not try. That night, after both kids were asleep, Lily in her room with its posters and books, Alex in his with the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck to the ceiling, Mason and Clara sat on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" Mason asked. "The way it all happened? The fear and uncertainty, and that awful couple of weeks when we weren't sure if we'd make it." Clara was quiet for a moment, considering. "No, because all of that is what made us appreciate this. If it had been easy, if you'd just immediately been okay with the pregnancy, we wouldn't have had to fight for each other, and fighting for something makes you value it more." Very philosophical. "I have my moments." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Besides, some of my best art came from that period. Turns out heartbreak is excellent creative fuel." "Glad I could contribute to your artistic development." "You're such a martyr." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing someone deeply. Mason thought about all the moments that had led them here. The coffee shop meeting, the first kiss, the night Clara told him about the pregnancy, the hospital room where Alex was born, countless mornings and evenings and ordinary moments in between. Every single one of them mattered. Every single one had built the foundation of this life they were living. "Mason?" Clara's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to love me. I know how hard it was for you to take that leap." Mason pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for not giving up on me when I was too stubborn to see what was right in front of me, for fighting for us even when I was fighting against it. We make a good team. The best team." Inside the house, they heard a small voice call out, "Daddy?" Mason sighed and stood up. "That's my cue." "Want me to go?" "No, I've got it. Finish your wine." He found Alex standing in the hallway, clutching his stuffed elephant, the one Lily had given him in the hospital all those years ago. "Can't sleep, buddy." "I had a bad dream." Mason scooped him up, carrying him back to bed. "Want to tell me about it?" "I dreamed that you and Mommy and Lily went somewhere and forgot me." Mason's heart squeezed. He sat on the edge of Alex's bed, holding his son close. "That's never going to happen. You know why?" "Why?" "Because you're part of this family, part of me. I could never forget you any more than I could forget my own heart." "Promise?" "I promise. You're stuck with us forever." Alex seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling back under his covers. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I love you." "I love you too, Alex, so much." Mason stayed until Alex's breathing evened out into sleep, then quietly left the room. He checked on Lily, who was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way of sleeping children, her book still open beside her. He marked her page and set it on the nightstand, pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, and stood for a moment just watching her breathe. His kids. His beautiful, perfect, occasionally exhausting kids. He'd been so scared of failing them, of not being enough, of repeating his parents' mistakes. But looking at them now, happy, secure, loved, he thought maybe he'd done something right after all. When he returned to the porch, Claire was still sitting where he'd left her, looking up at the stars. "Everything okay?" "Bad dream. He's fine now." "You're a good dad, you know that?" "I'm trying." "No, Mason, you are. You show up, you stay. You love them so fiercely it's almost frightening. That's all they need." Mason sat back down, pulling Clara against his side. "I used to think love was about protecting people from pain, about controlling everything so nothing bad could happen. And now? Now I think love is about showing up even when you're scared, about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, about being present for both the good and the bad, because that's what makes it real." Clara tilted her face up to kiss him, soft and sweet. "Look at you, being all emotionally evolved. I had a good teacher. You had a stubborn girlfriend who refused to let you sabotage the best thing that ever happened to you. That too." They stayed on the porch until late, talking about everything and nothing. Alex's upcoming birthday party, Lily's school project, the trip they were planning for the holidays, the little repairs the house needed. Ordinary conversations about an ordinary life that felt anything but ordinary to Mason, because this was what he'd been too afraid to hope for. Not perfection, not a life free from struggle, but a life full of love and laughter and people who mattered. A life where he was allowed to be imperfect and scared and still be enough. Years from now, when both kids were grown and making their own choices and finding their own paths, Mason would look back on this time and recognize it for what it was. The moment when he finally understood that the ending he'd feared had actually been a beginning. The moment when he learned that love wasn't something to be controlled, but something to be surrendered to. But for now, sitting on his porch with his wife, because yes, they'd gotten married 2 years ago in a small ceremony in their backyard with Lily as maid of honor and Alex as ring bearer, he was content to simply be present. To appreciate this moment, this life, this family they'd built from fear and hope and stubborn refusal to give up. "I'm glad you stole my coffee that day," Mason said into the comfortable silence. Clara laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Best accident I ever made." "No," Mason said, pulling her closer, thinking about the pregnancy that had scared him so badly, the baby who'd forced him to confront every fear he'd been hiding from, the family that had emerged from what he'd thought was disaster. "Best accident we ever made." Inside the house, their children slept. Around them, the October night settled into peaceful darkness. And for the first time in his life, Mason Reed felt no need to plan for tomorrow, to control the variables, to protect himself from possible pain. He just let himself love and be loved and trust that whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that was more than enough. It was everything.